I would hand over to the Chris, the technical speaker of today, with API management. And Chris, if you don't mind, feel free to take over the sharing and give us some insights into your agenda for today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Florian. So I'm Christopher Spengler. I'm senior consultant for integration topics since I would say almost 7 years now. And I'm your today's host. And let me share the slides for today.
Yep.
Okay, we start at the table of content. Okay, so welcome all. Here's a quick overview of what we will cover in today's session. We will start by looking at how API management supports integration modernization, why it is a key component when moving away from traditional integration patterns and towards a more agile API-first architecture. Then we will dive into an overview of API management in the APG version, followed by the core elements of the API management, the API portal as well, policy configuration, monitoring, debugging tools, and the API Developer Hub as the central place for developer engagement. After that, we will shift our focus to the edge integration cell and take a look at how API management works in a decentralized, local, or even a hybrid environment, runtime environment. We will walk through the development environment and monitoring capabilities there as well. As you can see here in the slide, SUSE and Red Hat covers the on-premise part of the edge integration cell, but there's also the possibility to deploy artifacts in your private cloud, like in Azure or AWS or Google. And finally, we will wrap up things with a hands-on demo session to bring everything we discussed into a real-world context. Our goal is to give you both the strategic overview and the practical tools to understand and apply API management in modern integration scenarios. So, how API management supports integration modernization. Yeah, API management plays a critical role in helping organizations modernize their integration landscapes. It enables an API-first approach, transforming from legacy point-to-point connection into scalable, reusable interfaces. With over 40 built-in policies for security, traffic control, and mediation, it ensures consistent governance across hybrid and multi-cloud environments. It bridges the gap between legacy and modern systems by exposing backend services, whether on-premise or in the cloud, as secure, consumable APIs. At the same time, it empowers developers to innovate faster using templates, policy reuse, and the central API catalog. Through real-time analytics, monitoring, and monetizing capabilities, SAP API management not only streamlines integration, but also turns APIs into strategic business assets. So let's now look at how API management works in the APG version. So API management is all about web APIs, mostly HTTP-based and often REST or SOAP-based. At its core, an API is simply messenger. It takes a request, tells the target system what to do, and brings back the response. But managing APIs at scale involves much more: traffic analysis, error tracking, performance monitoring, developer onboarding, and more. And that's exactly what SAP API management helps you do in a governed, scalable, and user-friendly way. Let's take a look at the two central entry points in SAP API management, the API portal and the developer hub. The API portal is used by API administrators and API developers. It provides a central view of all your APIs in your landscape, including traffic, usage patterns, errors, deployment statuses, and onboarding information. From here, you can also take a quick action to manage, troubleshoot, or update APIs. On the other side, we have the API Developer Hub. This is where internal and external developers can search, test, subscribe, and consume APIs. It's a self-service interface that simplifies developer onboarding and supports API adoption across your organization. Together, these two components ensure that APIs are not only well managed, but also easily accessible and usable by the right audience. The API portal is the central cockpit for managing your APIs. It gives you a high-level overview of traffic volume, performance trends, deployment status, and even developer onboarding. You can immediately spot issues like frequent errors or slow responses and take action from here. It's designed to provide control at scale. So whether you manage 10 APIs or hundreds, you stay in charge. One of the strengths of API management is the ability to accelerate development through reuse. So developers can browse the discovery section for standardized APIs as well as policy templates. These assets follow SAP best practices and can be copied directly into your own environment. This reduces development effort, ensures consistencies, and helps teams move faster without compromising governance or security. You can create APIs either from scratch or more efficiency by discovering services that already exist in your backend systems, for example. Through the cloud connector, even on-premise services can be securely accessed and exposed as an API. API providers are created to establish connectivity, and then policies can be applied to manage traffic, secure access, or even perform data transformation. This makes API creation both fast and robust and gives teams flexibility depending on their architecture. Governance in API management is driven by policies, and SAP provides over 40 built-in out-of-the-box policies to cover a wide range of scenarios. You can protect your API, manage the traffic with quotas, for example, and spike arrests, apply caching, and even transform payloads using JavaScript or Python. The Visual Policy Editor makes it easy to configure these rules, even complex logic, without writing a full application. If you want to expose your APIs to partners or developers externally, API management supports the monetizing feature. You can bundle related APIs into products, define a rate plan, for example, with a pricing model, and then generate billing based on the usage. This helps you track API consumption, manage quotas, and even turn APIs into revenue-generated services if needed. Monitoring APIs is critical for both reliability and continuous improvement. You can track metrics like usage trends, error rates, and response times. The portal also supports creating custom dashboards and drill-down views. This empowers API administrators and product manager to identify issues quickly and continuous optimize the API landscape. And finally, once your APIs are ready, you need a place where developers can easily find and use them. The API Developer Hub provides exactly that. A developer user-friendly portal where APIs can be searched, tested, subscribed to, and consumed. Works for internal teams, partners, or ecosystem developers, making it much easier to drive adoption and innovating across organizations. So now we cover the SUSE Red Hat Edge integration cell scenario of the API management. This is how it looks like in the like at the cloud integration view. So the Edge integration cell is designed to run in an environment where local data processing is required, whether due to latency, compliance, or architectural needs. In this view, we see how APIs are defined in the Edge integration cell environment. Each API includes metadata like its ID, name, description, and service type, along with the virtual host under which it is exposed. This setup allows organization to keep data close to where it's generated without sacrificing governance or visibility. Here we zoom in on target endpoint configuration with Edge integration cell. The endpoint defines where the API will route the request, typically to a backend system or microservice of, for example, a local application. Even in edge scenarios, you retain full control over routing logic, security, and transformation policies, all managed within familiar SAP tooling. This resource view is especially relevant for our database APIs. It shows the underlying entity model, such as business objects or data sheets, data sets, and which operation are available for each. So for example, get, post, or delete. This visibility helps developers understand the scope of an API without diving into a technical documentation. Everything is structured and visualized. Unfortunately, we do not have an API, a running API with a resource. That's why it's empty, but I will show you how it looks like in the APG version later. Here's where it's got powerful. So policy design in Edge integration view. This view looks very similar to what we know from the integration flows. You can use predefined steps like a content modifier and apply security, routing, or transformation logic directly within the API. This means that whether you are in the cloud or at the edge, the same policy-driven governance model applies across your landscape. And of course, monitoring is just as important at the edge as it is in the cloud. This interface lets you monitor APIs in integration flow side by side, inspect messages in detail, and trace the step for each process. It also clearly separates edge nodes, giving you a transparent view of what happens where and making it easy to troubleshoot localized issues. So now we covered all the technical parts. This is if you want to know more about SAP and heading with API management, the Roadmap Explorer is the place to go. You can find the detailed information about upcoming features, innovations, and long-term plans by simply searching for SAP Cloud Platform API Management on the SAP Roadmap site. It's a great way to stay aligned with future capabilities and plan your own roadmap accordingly. I would like to jump into a system demo. For that, I will end the presentation and jump directly into the system. So as you all hopefully know this integration suite view. So this is our internal SAP integration suite. So we have a more or less some edge integration cells running so that we can deploy also APIs on the edge integration cell. But let's start with the APG version. So to go directly into the API portal, you have to first log in to the system and then go to configure APIs, and then you see this view, and it should all start with the API providers. As I said, this is the connection to your backend system, or for example, a cloud integration. As you can see here, we have some on-premise connection as well as cloud integration connections. So let's have a look into one of these API provider, for example, this one. So for the connection, we have a type cloud integration, then we have the host name of our cloud integration, and as well the port. And in Cloud Foundry, it is more or less every time you would like to connect to the cloud integration, you have to use OAuth client credentials. So these client ID, client secret, and token URLs are generated in your instances. So you have to create instances from type from service, process integration, runtime, and plan should be API. That's the first thing you have to do. And then you can create an API provider like this with a testing functionality to see if the connection to the cloud integration is working. So for this, everything is fine. It's connected, and this API provider could be reused for different APIs. So let's see the API proxies, which stands for an API. So we have a lot of APIs with different statuses. It's sometimes not deployed, sometimes deployed, and you see here the typical types. So we have REST APIs, we have OData APIs, as well as SOAP APIs. To create an API proxy, you click on Create, and then you have the possibility to reuse one of our API providers. So, for example, we use the API provider we had a look 5 seconds ago. And then this is the functionality we also covered in the technical part. You have the possibility to discover the whole cloud integration from the artifact perspective. These are all the artifacts which are currently running on our cloud integration runtime. So, for example, let's see if we have an OData service. This is an OData service I created before the session. So this is an OData service which is running on the cloud integration with some test data. So let's see what happens here. It asks for the authentication against the cloud integration flow itself. So here we have to use again an instance, but not from the plan API. It should be from the plan integration flow. So this is what we are using now. We have client ID. So we set it to OAuth 2 client credentials, client ID, client secret, and token URL. And let's see. Now it creates also an API provider, but not from type cloud integration. It's from type cloud integration flow. So let's see what happens here. So we have discovered the URL to the flow itself. We have the name, the title of the API, and we have also the API base path. This is the end after the host name of the API management. And you see here the service type. It's OData. So also this is discovered from the cloud integration. And now we have the possibility to create an API proxy to this OData service. And to check if it's working, when it is in OData, it's really easy. You just have to click on resources, and then you see, okay, it is working. It loads every resource, or it loads the resource from the cloud integration into the API management. And you see here the resource model. You see the allowed methods: get, post, get, put to different entities for an ID read, for example, or delete, and all other entities like institute set and so on. So this is working fine. You see also here the endpoint for the cloud integration. For example, if you would like to use a different API provider, you can here switch also the API provider. If you have, for example, a newer version, then you can easily switch it to a different API provider, as well as you can also every time edit the target endpoint to different flow. And for example, the OData resource model changes. Then you have the possibility to synchronize against the OData service. If you click on synchronize, it asks, okay, would you like really to synchronize against the flow? And then you see, okay, no changes available at the time. But if the resource model is updated in the past, you would see here, okay, some changes are implemented, and then you can see it in your resource model here directly. So this API is currently in the state not deployed. If I would like to deploy it, I have to save it first. That's what I did, and then I can deploy it. And now it is reachable by this API endpoint here, API proxy URL. As you can see, also it is working fine now. You see the OData model, but in most of the cases, you would like to secure this API. So this is what we are doing with policies. So there are 40 built-in policies, as I said, and you can implement those policies here in this flow. You can see this is user, the target endpoint, and here the response comes back. So it is also possible to transform the response. So for example, you would like to filter out some of the response data. For example, user-specific data you would like to filter out. This is also possible by using a Python script or something like that. I would like to go not into detail, but give you a quick overview about the most used policies in this step. So I would say the most used policy is the verify API key. Verify API key means you have to send an API key with your request. Most of the time, we are sending this API key in the header information. So you have to change this this part here to header, and then API management will check the API key. So this is, I would say, enough for the API key. I will later on show you how to get this API key. So now we have implemented this API key check. but maybe you would like to also add some quota checks. So for example, you would like to have a quota, you would like to allow 2 requests in 1 minute. So if you apply this policy, it will check for the number of requests in a specific number of time, and then all other requests in 1 minute from 2 to 3, it will block, and you will get a response that the quota exceeds. So this is also very, very popular. And also the OAuth policy here, it's also really popular. So if you implement this OAuth check, it will check for client ID, client secret, not for client ID, client secret, sorry, for the token you send. But how to get this token? So first of all, you have to create a dummy API. With this dummy API, you can create a service like a token service. So you use this dummy API to get a token. What you have to do is you have to send client ID and client secret in this service to the token URL, which represents the API endpoint. Client ID, client secret will be the API key for the client ID and the API secret for the client secret. You will later see what I mean with this API key and API secret, but then API management will give you a response with the token, and now you can check in the real API you are using for the OAuth token if it's valid or not. So this is also one thing which is really popular. Then we have the spike arrest, for example. Also, this is really popular. XML to JSON, for example. So when you have, for example, you would like to not use the cloud integration, then you can do transforming steps also directly in the API management. So going back to the API itself, then we can talk about the engagement. That's also the point where the API key and the API secret comes into the play. So we have this API products. The API products are bundles of APIs. So for example, we have an API product like this, and we see, okay, in this product, we have 2 different APIs. These APIs are now published at the API Developer Hub under the name SAP S/4HANA product. And you can also add permissions here. So for example, these permissions are BTP roles. So you have to create role collections, for example. You can here apply those role collections, for example, this. And then only the users can access this or view and access this API product in the developer portal when they are part or member of the specific API of the BTP role or role collection. So you can specify for discovering that you see this API product in developer portal, and then you have another role for discovering, not for discovering, for creating an application out of this API product in developer portal. This will be covered in the next minute. So let's jump directly into the developer hub. So this is all the API portal. And now we are leaving the API portal and go to the developer hub. And this is the place where your API developers view, subscribe, and to the specific API. So we see here all the published API products, and also how many APIs are in this product. And for example, this SAP S/4HANA, we see here both APIs, and now we are allowed to see that. We have the role to see it, or maybe there is no role, then we see all the API products which do not have any role. So as an API developer, the first step I would have to do is to create an application out of this API product. That means I have different applications, and for each application I have an API key and an API secret. So let's see. Now I'm creating an application, and this takes a while. And now we see application secret and API key. And this API key should be part of the request in the header, for example. So if you implement this check API key, you have to send application key, in this case, in the header. If you would like to use the OAuth token generator, for example, you have to create a request with the application key as the client ID and the application secret as the client secret, and the token URL. Sorry, hopefully it is coming back. Yeah, okay, sorry. The application, the token URL is the endpoint of your dummy API. So for example, you have an API like OAuth token generator, and then you open this proxy, and you see here the API proxy URL. This would be your API token URL, and in this token URL you have just one policy, and this is generate OAuth token, and then you send the request to this API, and the API management will then send you a response with the token, with the OAuth token, and this OAuth token can be used for the main request, I would say. Exactly. So what we also covered in the technical part is the monetizing feature. So here we have, for example, two rate plans, the gold plan and the monthly charge. And you can see here, so it is set to a basic charge of 15 euros, for example, per month, and then for an API call, 50 cents. And then you can assign this rate plan to a specific product. That means you go into a product, you have the permissions here, and you have also the rate plans. And if you edit the rate plans, you can add a monetizing plan. And then every call will be visible here in the monetizing section. Also, the total amount of money will be also visible here in the monetizing section. I don't know if it's needed, but it's I would say a nice feature. There's also some blocks regarding integration to get this monetizing data out of the API management. And one important thing is also the test API. So you can test in API portal the APIs API proxies which you create under API configuration. This is for API portal, but you have the same thing also in the developer hub. So the developer can also test the published APIs. So for example, here you can see all the APIs where my user is allowed to see that, or not allowed, to see it, and we can then choose one and add, for example, authentication as well as headers. So for example, if you implement the API key policy, you have to add the API key header here, like API key, and then the API key. And here you can see the response when you send the request. Yep. I would say this is enough for the APG version. Now I would like to jump directly into the Edge integration cell view or version of API management. So we are going into design, integrations, and APIs. And for example, here you see all the packages which are created in our community. And this is my package. And in this package is my OData service, which you previously saw in API management, where the resources were be loaded out of the cloud integration. And you also see an type API. So this is, for example, an API which is created here in this section. And as you saw in the technical part, you have an overview, name, ID, a short text, a description, the service type, it's REST, and the API base path. This is also the path behind the host name and a runtime profile. So target endpoint is the endpoint. In our case, this is our internal backend system when OData service is running. So this is just for testing purposes. And as it is a REST API, unfortunately, we do not see any resources here, but we see policies. And I think you all know this view. It's like developing an iFlow, but a little bit different. So in that case here, we have an authentication policy, which checks for basic authentication. We have a quota here, which checks the quota. So 2 calls in 60 seconds. And the fetch API key is also implemented with a content modifier. I think you all know the content modifier out of the integration flows. And we have also an exception sub-process and the main request to the target system, which represents our backend system in this case. Exactly. And monitoring. So if you would like to monitor this API, you have to go to the monitoring section. But first of all, in case you would like to deploy such an API, you click on deploy, and then the system asks you where to deploy it. So in our case, we have a lot of edge integration cells running. So you can choose here the integration cell you would like to use, and then it will deploy this API in the specific edge integration cell. And then it is visible here in the monitoring section, like an integration flow. We have also APIs in place. So let's have a look. When I'm searching for API, this is all integration flow. sorry. We have to first check the runtime. So this is cloud integration runtime. And in case we are trying to catch the APIs on a specific edge integration cell, we have to see on which integration cell the API is running. So you see here there are 2 APIs currently started. This is the endpoint you are using, or you can use for Postman requests, for example. And as you all know from integration flows, you can set the log level to trace, then trigger, for example, a request to this endpoint, and then you are able to see in the monitoring section the incoming request as well as the response. I would say this is more or less enough for the edge integration part. We have 10 minutes left, so maybe we jump back to the slides to have a quick question and answer section.
Yes, I guess in the meanwhile, Chris, we answered almost, never sure, almost all the questions from the chat, if I'm not totally wrong.
Okay, that's cool.
But feel free to also now use either the chat to ask additional questions or unmute yourself. What's more comfortable for you to ask them?
There was...
Yes, is monitoring the same for non-edge integration cell flows? And now you confused me. So non-edge integration cell is a known cloud integration runtime, right? And in cloud integration runtime, the classical monitoring environments remains the same.
Correct. No, I think my bad. I meant right for the APIs which you hosted on EIC, you just showed the monitoring way, right? Now, if I have the old way, right, without EIC, if I would pushing up an API on API management and would want to monitor it, is it the same or is it a different view?
It's a different view. So in case you would like to monitor it in APG, you have to use, you have to go to the configure tab, you jump into an API proxy, and then you have the possibility to go to debug. And then you can start a debug section, send a request, and then you will see all the steps here with marked with like a flow step control, where you can select a specific step and see what's happening in this step.
Understood. Thanks.
No worries.
Good. 1 or 2 more minutes.
Sorry, I just want to continue on that same question about API monitoring. So in case there are any errors on APIs as such, like you did mention that we need to put this debug on, but that would be in cases wherein we want to test out a certain API. But like iFlows, we have got the monitoring window wherein we could straight away go in and monitor which all iFlows have gone into errors and then maybe like create alert emails or whatever. Can similar thing be done for the APIs as well?
Yes or no. You can implement, for example, an integration flow behind it. So maybe not a direct connection to the backend system and use, for example, the cloud integration as a middleware between API management and the backend. And in case of an error, you can implement there an mail notification, for example. But for API management, maybe it's possible with a policy to set something like a mail notification, but to be honest, I didn't it in the past, so yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Someone mentioned Cloud ALM, so yeah, can it be used for API too?
Florian, can you cover this question? I'm not so deep inside Calm. Maybe you can cover it, or we have to pick it.
Not from heart, no. I can check it in parallel. I would guess not, but I'm not sure. So right now, I just think the process integration runtime is covered in Calm, but I might be wrong.
Okay, but at some point of time that would be planned, right? I mean I can think about a use case. We use APG heavily, not with SAP, right? But the OPDK of APG, and I mean we would have scenarios, right, wherein we want to
I need to check with the Calm team. So for sure, what's coming next, I can tell you, is the monitoring for Edge integration cell itself, for advanced event mesh. You'll see it on the roadmap. For API management, I really need to check.
Okay, probably the last one because you have others coming.
Yeah, but also this, yeah, the tool is already there. Yeah, but anyway, I have to check. The next one you see in Q3, I guess, is the integration monitoring, message monitoring for Edge integration shell and for advanced event mesh, right? And maybe could put it also to the summary minutes at the end, but API management, I'm not sure.
All right, thanks.
Good. Yes, we're going to send out the recording, either per mail or per event platform. We have to figure out. Then I would suggest we are done for today. Expect a mail or a link to a platform where you can download the slides and the recording, or you have it attached. So we're going to decide early next week how we are going to share the content. Welcome you to our next session, which is in about 2 weeks. Yeah, and what is the session all about? Let me see. I do not know it by heart. Clean Core, mid of May or something. Beginning of May, Clean Core. With the dimension of integration only. I can already tell you, we're not going too deep into the dimension of extension and processes and operations, but we rather focus on the integration dimension. Thanks a lot, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.